Afternoon, we're going to start with Parshas Yisro, and I'd like to talk a bit about the Ten Commandments today. First, I'd like to talk about the Ten Commandments in general, which are in Parshas Yisro, also in Va'eschanan. They're in Parshas Yisro, very near and dear to my heart because I have a dream of going to Har Sinai and writing the Ten Commandments there. I would feel the spirit to do that. And if anybody, I now know about the dates and the exact details of that trip. If anybody is interested, you can reach out to me and I can tell you about it offline. I'll tell you about it. But I want to talk a little bit about the Ten Commandments, and we talk now a little bit about the Ten Commandments. And I want to focus on one commandment, which to me is the most unusual commandment. But before we go into the Ten Commandments, I'd like to first read an introduction. I found something really, really beautiful, powerful from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik talks about the Ten Commandments. This is what Rabbi Soloveitchik writes in the Chumash Mesoras Harav. It's originally published in The Emergence of Ethical Man, on page 198. He writes this on the comments, "You shall not steal." So the Midrash states that the first commandment, I am Hashem, corresponds to you shall not murder. Each of the first 5 commandments correspond to 1 through 5 correspond to 6 through 10. So I am Hashem corresponds to number 6, which is you shall not murder, because the murderer reduces God's image in the world. And you shall not steal, which is number 8, corresponds to do not take the name of Hashem in vain. Do not lo sisa Hashem al kacha bashav, because what happens is once you steal, the thief is then going to end up swearing falsely in court. So each of the first 5 correspond to 6 through 10. But then Rabbi Soloveitchik writes this. This is something I never realized. It's something so simple, but I never realized it before. The 10 Commandments are unique because of their ethical character. Not one commandment, not one, refers to worship and ceremony. There's no commandment in the 10 Commandments that's about worship or ceremony. It doesn't say to blow the shofar. It doesn't say to shake a lulav. The ethos pervades the whole scene of the Sinaitic revelation. Even the first 5 commandments, which refer to the God-man relationship, they don't suggest to us any service or cult performance, nor do they imply that God should be treated differently than the treatment accorded to man. I want to just say that again. Even the first 5 commandments, we talk about the commandments, the first 5 are between man and God. The second 5 are between man and man. He says, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, no. The first 5 refer to the God-man relationship, and they don't suggest any special worship. And they don't imply that God should be treated differently than the way we treat man. The way we treat man is the way we treat God. Don't swear falsely. Don't take God's name in vain, which is basically stealing from people because you're going to swear falsely in court. There is a consistent parallelism, Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, between the first commandments and the last ones. The rabbis noticed that the latter 5 correspond to the first 5. Then Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, apparently God does not claim any privileges or unique rights. Wow. What an unbelievable sentence. God does not claim any privileges or unique rights. The same measure of honesty, loyalty, devotion, which is owed to God, is also due to one's fellow man. Wow. Because covenant morality applies to both God and man. Therefore, it's hardly possible to speak of ritual and cult in Judaism or of the traditional division of laws between man and God. One and the same ethos regulates social interrelationships. Man's contact with God should be seen against the backdrop of human divine society. It's such a simple idea, but it's of course so powerful and so true that the relationship with God is a mirror image of the way we're supposed to relate to man. Powerful. The Ten Commandments are not about our own personal, how we worship God. They're just about how we relate to God and how we relate to man. And they have to be the same. Today's Daf Yomi talks about a person who's a Nazir. He wants to accept upon himself to be a Nazir while standing in a cemetery. Now, this is a oxymoron. You can't be a Nazir in a cemetery. A Nazir is someone who takes upon himself a vow to not drink wine, not cut his hair, and not come in contact with a dead body. So how can you stand upon in a cemetery and say, I want to be a Nazir? It's an impossibility. It's not possible. It's like eating a pork sandwich on Yom Kippur and saying, while you're eating the sandwich, you say, I'm sorry for eating the pork. It's a complete contradiction. And that's what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying here. The Ten Commandments are telling us that when it comes to our lives, when it comes to worship of God, that can't be any different than the requirements with which we treat man, than the responsibilities with the way we treat man. The honesty, the devotion to fairness and truth the way we treat God has to be exactly the same way with the way we treat human beings. This is such a simple idea, but it's something I never realized. The Ten Commandments stand at the core. I'll share this in a few moments. Ten Commandments are at the core of what it means at the center of the Torah. And so at the center of the Torah is the responsibility to act as one as relates to God, and act as one as relates to God and as it relates to man. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, see if anybody has a question. I saw some people were getting ready to ask questions. Let me just stop.